Is the number one most important thing to them that month or that year their credit so that they can go get more in debt? Probably not. Good morning, my name is Adam Davis, and we're going to be talking a little bit today about debt and the different levels, I guess we could say, of approaching if I have debt or you have debt and just like me, you hate it and you want to eliminate it as fast as possible to get to that point where we're debt-free. You know, and it's almost one of those things that out in the world we just think that it's almost something that can't happen to us is to become debt-free, because it seems like we're always in debt, whether that's a car or a home or there's that student loan or the credit card or whatever it is that we have to do. Sometimes in life those emergencies come up, we weren't as prepared, is that we do need to get in debt. And once we are in debt, we want to eliminate that debt as fast as we can. And so sometimes the question arises as I meet with people is, what's the best way to eliminate this debt? Well, that's not necessarily a fair question, because the answer to any question that starts with what is the best way to fill in the blank depends. It depends on the situation. But what we're going to talk about today is there are really, when you look at organizing or moving around or approaching debt, there's really 6 different ways to do it. And each of these, and we'll talk about them in order of kind of which ones are the least aggressive all the way to the most aggressive that can really affect our credit or affect some of the different things that we're doing. Jumping to this, so there's really a couple of approaches, and the most aggressive and the ones that people, you know, try their hardest in their life to avoid. If we were to put this at the very top, you know, of the most aggressive, so if this is the most aggressive, all the way down to the least aggressive approaches in debt. The most aggressive that people, you know, really try to avoid in their life is bankruptcy. And then the least aggressive one is really just creating a debt elimination plan, or as I call it, just organizing debt the right way. I mean, you think about, you have a home office or something like that, and or an office where you work, and there's just stacks of papers everywhere, and how disorganized it is, which kind of causes chaos in all the other things around us, where if we were to just organize it or organize it a little bit differently, it makes us feel better, and we have an approach that we know we can stick to, or filing or whatever. And so that's why a lot of the time I like to call it organizing our debt very first. There, so eliminating or organizing is going to kind of be level 1 as we approach our debt, where we're just going to take the debts that we have and actually sit down and organize them, where we know the interest rates, we know the payments, we know what the required payment is, we know what we're actually paying, where we're just getting it organized and can create a debt elimination plan, which we'll talk about all the different ways of doing that in a future episode, but we'll start there today after we look at all of them. Okay, so debt elimination plan is going to be approach number 1, just to get things started. Okay, number 2, the next level up, as we kind of ratchet up the level of aggressiveness, is going to be to transfer where the debts currently are. I know how to spell transfer. Transfer, okay? Is to just transfer where the debt is to another more favorable location for the debt. So, for example, if I have a credit card that's at 39%, what can I do just to eliminate or organize that card? Let's say it's with Chase. I can call Chase on the phone, and we do this with clients all the time. and if you have a credit card with a high interest rate, go do this today. Call the place that has that card and ask them to lower your interest rate. And you're like, well, but my contract says no. And some of you are like, yeah, I already knew I could do this. But some people don't know this. You can actually call the credit card company. They're making new offers to other people all the time at 5% for the first 2 years, or 0% on balance transfers for a year, or they're making all these offers to everyone else. Well, here's the thing: if you call them, and even though they're getting millions and millions, potentially billions of dollars in payments and interest each year, they want your money just as much as anybody else wants your money in your business. And so it's not necessarily a threat, but if you were to call the credit card company and say, hey, I'm looking to transfer my debt that I have with you to another credit card provider, or could we negotiate in a way and bring down the interest rate that I have on the card there with you? Because if not, then I'm gonna transfer it. A lot of the time they'll lower your rate. Where you might be at 39, they could lower it. I've had conversations with clients where they are at in the 30s or the 20s. They call the company and they'll lower it all the way down to, I've seen as low as 12%, 8%, 10%, 18%. 18% is not great, but it's a whole heck of a lot better than 39 or 38, right? And so that's approaching it where it's organizing, eliminating first by lowering the interest rate, which then frees up money in payments because of that lower interest rate. But if that's not the step, and again, that's step one, then we go to the transfer, and we can open another credit card and do a balance transfer of what we owe on this one at high interest to one that we have lower interest. Okay? The next level up is going to be debt consolidation. Debt consolidation, which is basically taking multiple debts and putting them together to either reduce the time or reduce payments or reduce interest rates, etc., and really to just make it more simple. Because if I have, let's say, we get to step one, we're organizing our debt, and I have, 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 or 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've got all these payments. I mean, how many of you have ever had multiple payments that you didn't have set up on automatic, and there was just one that you just flat forgot about one month just because there are so many? Well, it may seem like a simple thing, but man, if I could get that down to 3 payments, that's easier, right? And if by getting it to 3 payments, it's lowering interest, and it's lowering my payments, my required payments, then that just seems simpler. And it doesn't just seem simpler, it is simpler. And so a lot of the time with certain debt, we can do all 3. We can organize it, and as we organize, we realize the ones that we can transfer to better interest rates. And as we're doing that, we also identify, hey, I could take number 1, 4, 6, 7, 8, and put those together. I could take number 2 and number 5 and put those together, and then just kind of leave 3 by itself, get down to these 3 payments, transfer it to better interest rates, better payments, and by having it now organized and something that I can actually do, I can eliminate it. And so here's the thing, again, and I talk about this a lot, and this may be the start of my rant for the day, is that let's say I have 8 credit cards, and they're all at 0% interest. So my interest is great, right? And as I make my payments, it's all going to principal. Versus having 3 payments, what does that do just to your way of thinking? I mean, just think of the way that you think about that, where it's you either have 8 payments that you have to keep track of or 3. It's so much easier to keep track of 3 things than it is 8 things. Ask anybody that has 8 kids or 3 kids. It's just easier. And so as a human being, as we organize and we're trying to eliminate our debt, just because the numbers say that 0% is better than, let's say I had a 2 or 3 or 5 or 8% on one of these cards, is that, well, the math says that this is the better place to have all your debt. Well, sometimes just because the math says it's the best place mathematically to have it doesn't mean that a human being can actually do it, right? And so you have to calculate in human behavior here. So consolidation is taking multiple debts and consolidating them into one or two, or making it simpler, simplifying the debt as we organize so that we can eliminate it in a way and an approach that we're comfortable with, that we know and are confident in ourselves that we can actually do. And thank goodness that most debt organizations have automatic payments where we can just set it up on automatic to where it's just going automatically and we don't really have to think about it. But just because we've done that doesn't mean we shouldn't check on it and regularly know where we are. Okay, so that's 1, 2, and 3. When we get to number 4, you know, going one level up from consolidation is something called credit counseling. Okay, what credit counseling does is pretty much every credit or debt institution has to have some sort of credit counseling where if you have debt with them, you enroll in like a class, basically, and you go do this credit counseling, and during that time, they have different terms where they will stop charging interest on the cards that you have. But you have to be careful, as this can help, it can also hurt if the plan is not followed very precisely. And so credit counseling, I go enroll in credit counseling. I'm taking the class. They give me basically a payoff schedule, stop my interest, and I'm making these payments to these cards to eliminate them faster as I work with them in improving my credit and debt situation. So the potential danger in that is that, well, what happens if you don't stick to the plan? Well, from stories I've heard from some clients that have rolled in some of these classes, not necessarily at my recommendation, but just talking about the different levels and then deciding which one that they want to do, is they will then be back charged all that interest that they were forgiven. And so that's kind of scary to think about. But that's credit counseling. Okay, and then the one step that this is one that we'll probably spend an entire episode on, maybe even get a guest from the company that I've worked with, a representative at one of the companies we work with, is one that I think a lot of people where they've tried this, they've tried this, they've tried this, they've tried this, nothing's worked, credit's horrible. You know, maybe it's even medical stuff. You know, that they had good intentions of paying off as much as they could. It's something that, you know, that medical thing, they had the best insurance that they could possibly find or afford, and they're really looking at bankruptcy as that option to alleviate the stress of their current debt situation, where a lot of the time people will skip from here to here, not really understanding that there's a step in between. And this one here that's sometimes overlooked, pretty sure that's how you spell it, but debt negotiation. What is debt negotiation? Debt negotiation is going to be where you have you have the company you owe money to, and then you have somebody in the middle that's helping negotiate between the two. So simply put, is the client, and I'm going to say this, and you're like, oh my gosh, that sounds terrible. Well, just remember that bankruptcy is on somebody's credit, or they're on their record, you could call it, for 7 years, where qualifying for a home is very difficult during that time period, where debt negotiation, what happens is you have the individual that has the debt that they owe to the institution. What happens is this individual stops paying all the institutions that they owe that consumer debt or credit cards or lines of credit. They stop making those payments, and they start making payments to the debt negotiation company that starts building up that money over time, and then they use that money to negotiate paying off the balance at the institutions. And so would that damage somebody's credit? Yes, a lot. But somebody that's at that point, are they really needing their credit for anything at that point? If their debt situation is so bad that they're needing the counseling or the negotiation or that they're on the border of bankruptcy, is the number one most important thing to them that month or that year their credit so that they can go get more in debt? Probably not. Do they want to maintain a good credit score? Yes, but do they want to get to the point where they have the credit score repaired faster, eliminating the debt, or that they just eliminate all the debt and then have to wait 7 years to be able to do anything? And so debt negotiation is something that can be used as a tool that exists out in the industry to help people eliminate their debt that we'll talk about on another episode. Maybe we'll do it next time, where it's learning a little bit more about what to do when we get to that point where it's like, oh man, should I file bankruptcy? Well, as that is still sometimes an option for people, especially those that are in a situation that is very drastic or a dire situation. But debt negotiation sometimes can be a better option in circumstances like that. So thank you for joining us this morning. Hopefully, as I felt as we were going through this, that just looking at this and knowing a way, an approach, it almost starts creating some hope in, you know what, maybe there is a way that I could eliminate or organize or transfer. And this was in no way to, talk specifically to the people here about this, but it's just getting a little bit deeper knowledge, a little bit more resources on how money works, how debt works. That, I mean, imagine what it's like if you could be a resource for people when it comes to their finances, their debt, and all the different things that they're doing, and how that would feel to be able to, walk people through this and give them tools that, who knows, 2 years later, a year later, 8 months later, it may take 3 or 4 years that they could come to you and say, this is what you did for me. You taught me this and it helped me, and it has done amazing things. And, I could tell story after story after story after story of each of these approaches and how it's helped people either start on the path to debt freedom or that they've actually done it and it's worked. And we've done it with dozens of people in the last 13 years, potentially hundreds. And it's just an awesome feeling to be able to help them, and I know how they feel about it. So thank you again for joining us in the Impact School of Money today, where our mission is to change the way that people are educated about money. Class dismissed.